Execution before conception. Meaning before perception. More is less. Those were just a few of the one-liners from Ed Feller, whose commercial colleagues christened him the King of Zing. Or did they? I'm Lillian Chin. Welcome to Designer People, where we travel the world through creative connections.
Boxes within boxes within boxes. It's me. You guys have everything on the hard drives. So this is my hard drive.
In Ed's case, the way is very unconventional indeed. The signs will not only be changing, they may well be a tad confusing, even mildly subversive.
I've drawn since I was an infant. My mother said that I was the easiest of her 5 children because all she had to do was give me a pencil and paper and I would crawl in the corner and draw and it wouldn't bother her for the rest of the day. I always carry the sketchbooks and I've been doing them for 37 years. And they're always done in the 4-color ballpoint pen and sometimes a little yellow pencil to just round it out a bit. Sometimes they're lettering, sometimes they're little bits of cartoons. Just like a machine that used to stamp out widgets, but they're not really prescribed widgets anymore. They're just little funny bits. They're not art, they're not poetry, because there's a lot of language in them, and they're not illustration. Yet they're all those things. 50 years worth of fragments of my inner life. With 8,500 pages, it's a considerable body of work. But what this all means as an individual page would be hard to say, but maybe as a whole, it has some credibility. The Polaroids are just my love for vernacular America, you know, the little towns, the highways, you know, all the back roads and the business of traveling around.
It's a delightful book for a number of reasons. Most importantly, it's a book that shows not only the influences he has, but the whole spirit out of which his work arrives. Some of the images are simply images of street graphics, and then he modifies it into his own sort of fantastic, imaginary typography. But it's really a wonderful example where the counterpoint between his impression and street culture is uplifting, curious, fantastic. It's really a remarkable point of inspiration, I think, for an awful lot of students and successful designers.
Anyone can walk down the street and take a few pictures of signs. There's lettering everywhere. You could take part of one sign and then come around and take part of another one. I'm not interested in documenting signs. It's just fragments of lettering. So in a way, this was an inspiration for my work. And on the other hand, a lot of it's just a reiteration of, oh, that's the kind of thing I do. And the Polaroid is perfect for it because it closes in on it. The camera does allow you a little bit to dial up or down, a little lighter or darker, but that's about it. It has a very narrow depth of field, so you get this really snapshot quality. But that's the range that you're seeing things as you walk down the street, because they're just about that far away. So it was the perfect camera for that. Unfortunately, they don't make the film anymore, and the cameras are gone. Can't fix them anymore, so I've gone to digital. Goodbye. End of an era.
There's some designers who definitely do not like Ed Feller's work. Those are the designers who've come out of the Swiss tradition, who seem to be a little bit too Swiss, hence a little bit humorless. The Swiss tradition of design was something that was based on the clarity of Helvetica. Has no extra elements to it. I mean, it is clear, it looks very systematic, and the Swiss came up with the grid systems.
A lot of design is bound by the idea of a grid. It's invisible, this grid, but it orders everything you see. Ed's design was clearly gridless. Ed's work took an extremely elastic approach to typography. He scattered the type around, he twisted it, he bent it out of shape, he cut pieces off it, he mixed typefaces together. It seemed almost to be turning through space. It had a moving, almost three-dimensional quality to it. He decided on instinct where a given piece of type would go in the design. And it's as though the design spoke not just with one typographic voice, but with several voices simultaneously.
This is the Fisher Building. It's a symbol from Detroit's golden age and an Art Deco masterpiece. It's also where Ed Fella held his studio.
I started working in the Fisher Building in 1965, I believe, for a company called Skidmore Serration. And Ed Fella joined us. I was intimidated by his work. I was just beginning, and he was too, but he was pretty darn good right at the very beginning.
I did lots of illustration, car catalogs, and dealer promotions, and I did also lots of hospital stuff, healthcare stuff. It was just what you call graphic design, commercial art.
He and a couple of his friends years earlier had come up with a definition of rendering in commercial art. If you could do it very quickly and spontaneously and it looked really right, they called that having the zing. And he had a saying, if you don't have the zing, you ain't got a thing.
I used to say, well, I was the king of zing because I'd whip out these quick drawings. Somehow somebody found out about it and it became, this is another one of these kinds of weird distortions. It becomes part of the mythology of my life that I had this nickname, which wasn't really quite true. We also used the term hack. You know, we were hacks, we'd hack like mad. And it was a derogatory term, but we kind of reclaimed it.
Ed was a very funny guy and still is. He had an unbelievable sense of humor, which he did drawings for himself that he'd hang on the wall that were politically incorrect, even though that wasn't really a word then. From politics to religion, anything that's part of our lives, he would make kind of cynical comments about with his drawings.
My thesis at Cranbrook was a page of one-liners. In fact, there's one around the corner here. Yes, I don't know the feeling. Execution before conception, meaning before perception. Forget about history so you can repeat it. There's the one. Design is always permission given or allowance taken. Oh, this was a good one. I hate fine anythings. You know, they're all out of context, so they all have a context that, you know, where they mean something. Oh, the poster started when I was sitting in my family room in my suburban house in Southfield, Michigan, and the moon landing occurred. So I was watching the moon landing on television, and I thought, wow, I'd like to say something about this moon landing. There was a new kind of printing that just started called offset printing, and it was business printing for business papers. It was before Xeroxing and all this. This is that moon poster. So I did it in 1969 for the moon landing. And it was done in the 50s style Container Corporation, this kind of American modernism, very optimistic period. And I used that style during this kind of postmodern, eclectic period when people were reworking styles.
AIGA is the largest and oldest professional association of designers in the United States. Since the 20s, we've been honoring the best designers in the country with the AIGA medal. One of the reasons we honored Ed Fella is that he's been so influential among a whole generation of designers. I mean, here's a person who is so avuncular that almost everyone loves this man. And he's an interesting person because Ed did not go to college. initially. And he came out of a commercial art background, and it was mid-career before he went back to school. And yet you find these young designers, many of them from the best schools in the country, who found themselves being protégés of Ed.
I don't use the computer. I still do everything by hand. I use ballpoint pens and crayons and pencils. And I use a waxer, so I wax things. You have to plug this thing in and heat it up, and then you can wax stuff and paste it down. I use a knife. I've had this one, I think, for I don't know how many decades. Just like the computer, except it's literally cut and paste. And that's how I work. And of course, I letter everything by hand. So I have these box of templates, and I use the French curves and templates to make my lettering.
He went back to the craft just at a time in design history when many of the designers were using technology. So that in the 80s and 90s, when people were moving to the computer and they were emerging from the Swiss tradition, Ed brought the street look, brought the popular culture, brought the craft back. And in that regard, it really influenced an awful lot of people who were moving along a stream that was much more technologically based, and it brought them back to the roots of design, which is really about hand-mind influence.
It was the best thing I ever decided, I guess, was to not get in on it and do what I already knew how to do and really perfect that, which I've done. And that actually made me famous. Tell you the truth, if I would have started on the computer in 85 or 87, I would just be another designer. But by doing the stuff by hand, that gave me a lot more flexibility. This is my studio at CalArts. It's just this little room, and this is where I hang out day and night, literally. I teach here one class a week. I'm pretty much retired now. I love to come here every day and hang around, work in my studio, and take in some of the activities that go on here.
CalArts is the California Institute of the Arts, and it is a private, meaning not state-funded, art school. It was founded in the late 1960s, largely funded by the Walt Disney Company. Walt Disney himself had this kind of visionary idea of an institution that would encompass all the arts. CalArts took almost an aggressively experimental stance, which is quite the opposite of the pop culture environment that the money came from, but which has turned out to be obviously of great influence and importance in the landscape of art teaching in the United States.
Well, Lorraine brought Ed to CalArts. She reformed the program and made it what it is today. It was fun to be in a critique with Ed and Lorraine because they know each other so well, and they would butt heads.
You know, I came out for a year to see what it would be like. 21 years later, I'm still here.
He's the kind of teacher that you always wanted to have. Everything is possible. Anything can be made into anything. It's always about inspiring you to take what you have and work into it and figure out what it is, build a body of work around it.
At the point that I met him, we were in a studio that did very high level but very commercial work. But Ed was one of the few people who seemed to also be interested in literally turning that work into art. Ed was the first person I met who seemed to understand design as kind of a workaday commercial pursuit, and then also to understand the culture of design, like European modernists, like the Swiss style, and kind of be able to see that for what that was, which was kind of design pitched at a somewhat higher level or that had higher aspirations.
There isn't anything that he sees or experiences that doesn't end up in his work some way. You can see him in lectures sitting there drawing throughout the whole thing, and he's capturing random words and making those into compositions. He finds things on the floor where he'll just pick up a scrap of paper and use it for the basis of a collage. Anything can be inspirational to him. He can start with one word and do a whole sketchbook based on that word.
He's incredibly positive in working with what the student has. He's not looking at them and saying, oh, I'm going to turn you into somebody else. Like, his idea is, okay, what does this person have? What can we add to that to draw them out so that they can get in control of their work and make it more interesting?
If there's one gift he's given me, it's to think of my work in terms of a whole lifetime of work and what's going to keep me excited and inspired for years.
Design is all about connections, but the connection between Cal Arts and Cranbrook is a connection with a capital C.
Most of the people that were teaching at Cal Arts in the mid-'80s came from Cranbrook. And in some ways, Cranbrook was a model for Cal Arts as well. An intense studio atmosphere that worked 24 hours a day with a small group of students, with faculty that really dealt with a theory of graphic design and a history of graphic design.
Cranbrook is a graduate school north of Detroit that was founded in the 1920s by a Finnish architect named Iliel Saarinen, who was the father of Eero Saarinen. It's a very tiny school. I think it has about 125 students at any given time. It's more like an atelier. There's a teacher in each specialty, and you have a studio there, and there are no classes. You just work with the artist in residence in your specialty, and then you work with your community of students. It's kind of, a lot of people compare it to a monastery. And so it's a very intensive environment that's produced a lot of interesting people.
I actually went to graduate school at Cranbrook Academy of Art in 1993, and I met Ed when he was invited as a visiting artist. I think that he's the greatest living graphic designer. I was very impressed by the fluidity with which he makes work, the ease, seeming ease with which he makes work, and also the kind of attitude that he makes work with.
And then students were so interested in what he was doing, they'd bring their work to him, and so there were a lot of exchanges and cross-participations. And they centered very much on a language of design, like how does design really work? How do people understand it? What kinds of projects can designers do instead of just waiting passively for that next assignment?
His picking apart of iModernism or modernist principles within graphic design language was instrumental in helping to kind of open the field up quite a bit. In his work, you can see a kind of systematic dismantling of a lot of the kind of primary principles of what virtually everybody was taught within graphic design.
Ed's early work caused a stir in a lot of ways because it was deliberately unprofessional, it was deliberately against the grain of what the commercial practice of graphic design was. I was a student at St. Martin's School of Art, and I graduated there in '91, and that was the same year that iMagazine started, and that was one of the first places that I think anybody in Europe saw Ed's work.
iMagazine continues to seek out and showcase new design trends in communication design, which apparently is the new term for graphics. And to be fair, graphics has been an oversimplification when it comes to what Ed Feller creates.
We were aware when we published the Cranbrook material, including Ed's work, that this was controversial. Not just Ed, but Cranbrook more generally.
Yeah, that was years ago. That was the culture wars in the early '80s. It was the last vestige of late modernism, you know, which felt that somehow it had perfected design, had turned it into a kind of purity, you know, that there was really nothing left, you know, it was perfect. It was truth with a capital T. The type was as readable as it could be.
There was this kind of shift with regard to my approach to work that came about through Ed. Rather than striving to get things right compositionally, rather than striving to get things right conceptually, there's a kind of notion of trying to get things wrong or just wrong. Cultivating an aesthetic, cultivating a kind of conceptual terrain that doesn't feel right, but feels wrong in a good way.
Ed Feller visited Australia and discovered something many Americans feel when they visit. Something oddly similar, yet not the same. Nostalgia, quirkiness, and a creativity that can simultaneously be crude and inspired.
The Narrows is located on Flinders Lane, which is known as being a gallery strip in Melbourne. I'm a fan of Ed Feller, which makes this exhibition more exciting for me to actually handle the work and to curate a show with quite an open brief from Ed. I was really interested in the work that he was doing whilst living in Australia. Chocolate bar wrappers and posters and cuttings that we see as mundane objects would have been quite exciting to him because they would have been different to what was being kind of seen in the States. So I'm really excited that we're exhibiting because they do offer that connection between Australia and how everyone else sees Ed Feller.
You know, when you start out, you're an entry-level designer, you're an emerging designer, and then you have a mid-career crisis. Finally, you've become a success, and then there comes a time when it's time to pack it in to retire. So what should you be then? Exit-level design is what I advocate. So you stop, you don't compete with the current generation in any way. You let them have all the money, you let them have all the work, you let them have all the glory. There's nothing more pathetic than some old guy trying to keep up when he should have long retired. It comes from Detroit, the Auto Workers Union, the UAW. Walter Reuther's idea back in the 1940s that an industrial worker would work for 30 years and then the company would retire him. And that way a worker wouldn't be burnt out and another worker would have an opportunity. So I like that idea for graphic design also. 30 years is enough. You won't be burnt out, and you'll have an opportunity to have a second career. You have to do a sort of experimental work or a commentary. Otherwise, when the 30 years are over, you won't know what to do. So you have to have a way of being able to practice all the things that you can never quite get around to when you're working, and now you can do them. So that's the idea of exit-level design.
He's an old guy, he's incredibly prolific, but he has this amazing attitude. He has this punk rock attitude where it's all about doing it yourself, and it's all about just giving yourself permission to do whatever you want to do and investing your work with ideas and doing your own thing and really not caring that much about what the establishment has to say. Even today, I think some traditional graphic designers still find his work difficult to deal with. They find it difficult to even think of it as a graphic design practice because it's somewhat on the fringes and it challenges all the conventions.
You know, that whole business about somehow commercial artists are sellouts to the commercial world and all they do is commodify their practice. That's what fine artists or pure artists do. Even worse than commercial artists. They sell their souls to galleries and gallery owners and collectors and critics. In a sense, not being involved in the commodified art world has allowed me to make my work completely free.
I think Ed will emerge as this gigantic figure in the future. I mean, more than he is now. And he's definitely a superstar.
So many designers, when they retire, become bad painters. So I've decided, yeah, I might as well be a bad painter because the culture, in a sense, has said to me, if you're a successful commercial artist, you must have been a failed painter. So now I can actually, with a free heart, make my failed paintings. So I make all these, they're just drawings for paintings. I've got hundreds of them that are my alternative history. Since it's been acknowledged by history as history, I don't have to make history anymore because evidently I made it.
Imagine into the future when eager students and academics begin to open up the boxes and digital files that house Ed's hieroglyphics, while millions of other documents in clearly set out font and form will have covered post-war America. It's doubtful if any captured the essence of issues as intuitively and uniquely as Ed Feller. I'm Lillian Chin, and this has been Designer People.